Random House Audio presents This Time Together, Laughter and Reflection by Carol Burnett. This is Carol Burnett. Introduction. During the past few years, I've zigzagged across the country, appearing in various theaters, performing Laughter and Reflection, a conversation with Carol where the audience asks the questions. It's just the audience and me. The evening lasts 90 minutes, beginning with 7 minutes of old Q&A clips from our TV variety show, just to give the audience an idea of what the evening is going to be like. Then I come out on stage and ask for the lights to be bumped up so I can see everyone. Lights up. Me. Good evening. Tonight is all about any questions you might have for me about our show, the people I've worked with, moments that stand out in your memory that you're curious about, anything at all. So just raise your hands and here we go. It's always a little scary because I'm working without a safety net. And there are no plants in the audience because if the event feels pre-planned, it just takes the fun out of it. The audience can tell if it's off the cuff, and through the years, people have been pretty enthusiastic and aren't at all shy about raising their hands. When I call on someone, I never know what the question will be. And I have to say, it keeps the old gray matter ticking and the blood pumping. However, through the years, there have been questions that were asked over and over, which gives me a breather by allowing me to count on being able to tell some set stories. If these questions weren't asked, for instance, if the audience was sitting on its hands, often I could bring up the subject myself and tell the story anyway. Whew! What follows are some of these stories that I've shared over the years in response to various questions. Some have to do with our gang on the variety show, embarrassing moments, famous people, not so famous people, family, and so on. Since I'm not planning on doing too many more of these story evenings in the future, I figured I'd write up some of my favorite stories for my grandkids and anybody else who might enjoy them, who might have some fun and laughs and maybe some nostalgic moments as well. Many years ago, in 1986, I wrote a memoir called One More Time, which was couched as a letter to my 3 daughters, telling them all about my growing up in a dysfunctional and yet loving family. That book didn't take my life beyond age 26. This time, I'm emphasizing episodes and anecdotes that have brought me to the present time, although I've also included a few stories from childhood that bear repeating. Originally, I began writing this book as a simple series of anecdotes, but as I got into it, I found that I went into more detail than I usually do on stage. I also found myself writing about things that I haven't talked about on stage, but which resonate with me. Some of them are even serious. These thoughts and feelings just kind of poured out onto the page. They might not be as amusing as some of my other remembrances, but they're memories I'd like to share. So what follows is a kind of memoir peppered with anecdotes here and there, and I hope you enjoy it. Jimmy Stewart. My grandmother Nanny and I were at the picture show. I hadn't reached 2 digits yet in age because I distinctly remember my feet couldn't touch the floor of the movie house. Nanny and I were still living in San Antonio, Texas. My mama and daddy had gone ahead to California, where Nanny and I would later wind up. The feature had just begun, and his face lit up the screen. I couldn't take my eyes off him. He was talking to a beautiful lady in a nightclub somewhere, and I'm not sure what the movie was even. It didn't matter. He had a kind of crooked smile and spoke with a soft, what kind of voice was it, a drawl? The camera followed him as he stood up. You could see how very long his legs were, and I was sure his feet never had trouble reaching the floor. "Skinny as a string bean," Nanny said. After the picture show, we went home to the old house, and I couldn't get the man in the movie out of my mind. He wasn't just an actor like all the others I'd seen in picture shows. This man was different. He spoke to me. I tried to explain this to Nanny. "Nanny, I know that man." "What do you mean you know him?" "I just do. He's my friend. We just haven't met yet." "That's nice, dear. Drink your Ovaltine, go to bed." Years later, in Hollywood, it was 1958 to be exact, I received a call from film director Mervyn LeRoy. He'd seen me in a couple of appearances on television and asked if I would meet with him. I was in my early 20s and just getting started, so naturally I was thrilled by his interest. He suggested that I come out to the Warner Brothers studios the next morning and meet him on the soundstage where he was shooting a movie. "Why don't you get here a little before lunch," he said, "so you can watch us shoot a scene?" Well, I'd never been on a real movie set. I owned one decent suit, one good pair of stockings, and one pair of resold high heels. My purse didn't match, but it was all I had, and I took the bus to Burbank. The studio guard had my name on his list and pointed me towards the soundstage. I waited for the red light outside, which meant keep out, to stop spinning. It stopped. A bell rang, and I walked into a huge cavern. Cameras, lights, cables on the floor, ceilings as tall as skyscrapers, and catwalks everywhere you looked. At the far end of the stage, I saw a small set. It was up on a rolling platform about 2 feet off the ground. And it was an office, a desk, one chair, a filing cabinet, and a door. The stagehands were securing it under the spotlights. Mr. LeRoy came over to me and introduced himself. "Glad you could make it, Carol. We just have a small scene to do before we break. Shouldn't take long." He motioned me to a chair out of the way and then yelled, "Okay, let's go for one." An actor climbed up onto the set and took his place behind the desk. Mr. LeRoy called out to another actor behind the set door. "You ready, Jimmy?" "All set back here, Merv." Oh, the voice. I knew it immediately. Oh, my Lord, I am in the same space as my idol. Mr. LeRoy called, "Action!" And Jimmy Stewart walked through the door and presented a badge to the man at the desk, and that was it. End of scene. Cut! That's a print. The movie they were shooting was the FBI story. Lunch was called, and Mr. LeRoy asked me if I'd like to meet Jimmy. Oh, he was still up on the set, and Mr. LeRoy gave me a helping hand as I climbed up onto the platform. We were introduced. I was inches away from the face I had loved since I was a very little girl. He smiled, and he said he was glad to make my acquaintance. He shook my hand, he looked into my eyes, and he seemed in no hurry to go to lunch. What was it about him that drew me to him in such a deeply personal way? I admired other actors. I was a big fan of a lot of them, but there was something about him that was different. I felt it every time I saw him in the movies, and now here he was. What I'd seen on the screen was amplified 100 times in person. The warmth, the humility, the humor, the heart. Well, a lump popped up in my throat, signaling the beginning of tears. Overwhelmed, I knew I had to get out of there before I started to cry. I felt like an idiot. Trying to be funny or flip or whatever it was, I gave a stupid little salute and piped up with what must have been one of the dumbest things I could have ever come up with. "Well, guess it's time to tie on the old feed bag." Oh, God, with that, I whirled around and stepped off the 2-foot-high set right into a bucket of whitewash. For a nightmarish moment, I just stood there frozen, my back to them with 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Frozen. Not wanting Jimmy Stewart or Mervyn LeRoy to realize that this was an accident, I decided to head for the door, hoping, praying, they'd think that I'd done this for a laugh. I didn't look back. I proceeded to drag that bucket, my right foot still in it, clear across the soundstage, about 5 miles. The whitewash was squishing away in my ruined shoe, making gurgly sounds accompanied by the scrape of the bottom of the bucket on the floor. Squish, gurgle, scrape, squish, gurgle, scrape. I didn't hear any laughter.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?